Standing at my son's wedding, my new daughter-in-law Sarah pointed at me and shouted to the packed reception hall, "She's not real family, take her seat away from the main table." The room erupted in laughter as I stood there, 68 years old, humiliated. I quietly walked out and made one phone call that would change everything. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Della Morrison, and if you saw me that day at the wedding, you'd have seen a small woman in a navy blue dress that took me 6 months to save for, standing alone while 300 guests laughed at my humiliation. But what they didn't see was the 45 years of sacrifice that brought me to that moment, or the strength I'd find to bring their whole charade crashing down. I wasn't always alone. Once I had Robert, my husband, my anchor, my everything. We'd married young, full of dreams about the family we'd build together. When our son Michael was born, Robert held him up to the hospital room window and said, "This boy is going to change the world, Della, and we're going to make sure he has every opportunity to do it. But life has a way of rewriting your plans." When Michael was just 12, Robert collapsed at work, heart attack. Gone before the ambulance arrived. In one afternoon, I went from wife and mother to widow and sole provider. The night after Robert's funeral, I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook, calculating how a secretary's salary could cover rent, food, utilities, and somehow save for Michael's college. The numbers didn't add up. They never did. So I became someone I never thought I'd be. During the day, I kept my secretary job at the local elementary school. Evenings, I waitressed at a diner downtown, coming home with aching feet and pockets full of dollar bills. Late at night, when Michael was asleep, I took in alterations and sewing work, my fingers working until they went numb. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, for years. I remember Michael's high school graduation. He was valedictorian, and as he gave his speech, he looked directly at me and said, "Everything I am, I owe to my mother, who never let me see her struggle, but worked miracles to give me opportunities she never had." The entire auditorium turned to look at me, and for once I felt proud instead of tired. When he got accepted to law school, I sold my mother's jewelry, the only valuable things I owned. My grandmother's pearl necklace, my mother's diamond engagement ring, pieces of family history traded for textbooks and tuition. "They're just things," I told myself, even as my heart broke a little. Michael thrived in law school, graduated top of his class, and was recruited by a prestigious firm. The day he got his first real paycheck, he took me to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. "Mom," he said, holding my weathered hands across the white tablecloth, "you gave up everything for me. Now it's my turn. You'll never want for anything again. I promise." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? This was my son, the boy I'd raised with love, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. But standing in that reception hall, watching him sit silent as his new wife declared me not real family, I realized something. I'd spent so many years looking at Michael through the lens of a mother's love that I'd failed to see who he'd become. The guests' laughter echoed around me, each chuckle a nail in the coffin of the family I thought I had. But they didn't know Della Morrison. I was about to teach them all a lesson about what real family means and what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Before everything fell apart, my life had settled into a rhythm that felt like a warm embrace after decades of struggle. I'd finally retired from my secretary position at the elementary school, complete with a modest pension and a farewell party where teachers I'd worked with for 20 years called me the heart of Jefferson Elementary. My small apartment in Brooklyn, the same rent-controlled unit I'd lived in since Robert died, had transformed from a place of survival into a genuine home. Every corner held a memory, every piece of furniture a small victory from when I could finally afford to replace something broken. My days started at 6 in the morning, not because I had to rush to work anymore, but because old habits die hard. I'd make my coffee in the same percolator I'd used for 30 years, sit by my kitchen window, and watch the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Chen from next door would wave as she walked her ancient poodle. Tommy, the teenager from upstairs, would rush past on his way to school, and I'd sometimes catch him to hand over a sandwich I'd made. Knowing his single mother worked nights and mornings were chaotic for them. Tuesday mornings were for my book club at the community center. 8 women between 60 and 80, reading everything from romance novels to political biographies, arguing passionately over characters as if they were real people we knew. Dorothy, our unofficial leader, would always say, "Della, you're too kind to these fictional people. You need to be more critical." But that was just my nature. Thursday afternoons, I volunteered at the church food pantry, remembering too well what it felt like to count pennies for milk. The pastor, Father Miguel, would often pull me aside to thank me, but I'd wave him off. "I'm just giving back what was given to me," I'd tell him. But Sundays were sacred. Those were Michael's days. He'd arrive around noon, always with yellow roses from the corner bodega, because he remembered they were my favorites from his father's funeral, when someone had brought them, saying yellow roses meant friendship and joy in sorrow. We had our routine down to an art. He'd sit at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd done homework as a boy, and tell me about his cases while I cooked. The menu never changed because Michael insisted on it. Beef stew with carrots and potatoes, cornbread from scratch, and apple pie that I'd started making at 5 that morning. "Mom, you don't have to go to all this trouble," he'd say every week, even as he ate 3 servings. "You could just order something." But we both knew it wasn't about the food. It was about the ritual, the connection, the proof that some things remained constant. While we ate, he'd update me on his life, his promotion to senior associate, the new car he was thinking of buying, the pro bono case he'd taken on because someone needs to help people who can't afford justice, Mom, like we couldn't have afforded it once. After dinner, we'd move to the living room, where I'd pull out my knitting and he'd help organize my photos into albums. I'd been meaning to do it for years, but somehow it became our project. "Look at this one," he'd laugh, holding up a picture of himself at 7, missing his 2 front teeth, wearing a Superman cape I'd made from an old bedsheet. "You always made magic out of nothing, Mom." Those Sunday afternoons felt like rewards for all the years of struggle. We'd watch old movies, the black and white ones Robert had loved, and Michael would fall asleep on the couch sometimes, looking so much like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The last normal Sunday before I met Sarah, Michael held my hands as he left and said, "Mom, I want you to know something. Everything good in my life exists because of you. You're not just my mother, you're my hero." I went to bed that night feeling like the richest woman in Brooklyn. If only I'd known it would be the last Sunday that truly belonged to us. 3 months before the wedding, Michael arrived for our Sunday dinner with a nervous energy I hadn't seen since he was waiting for his bar exam results. He kept checking his phone, smiling at the screen in a way that made me happy for him. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet," he said, and my heart swelled. My boy was in love. 20 minutes later, Sarah walked through my door and the apartment suddenly felt smaller. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, elegant, with perfectly manicured nails and a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her blonde hair was styled in one of those complicated ways that looked effortless, but probably took hours. When Michael introduced us, she extended her hand for a brief shake instead of the hug I'd instinctively opened my arms for. "So you're Della," she said, looking around my apartment with an expression I recognized from my waitressing days, the look rich customers gave when they ended up in a diner by mistake. During dinner, something felt off, like a picture frame hanging just slightly crooked. Sarah spent most of the meal on her phone, occasionally showing Michael something that made them both laugh. A private world I wasn't invited into. When I served the beef stew, she pushed the potatoes around her plate. "I don't really do carbs," she explained, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael, who normally had 3 helpings, barely finished one. The cornbread I'd woken up early to make sat untouched on her plate. "So, Della," Sarah said, finally putting her phone down, Michael tells me you were a secretary. That must have been steady work. The way she said steady made it sound like a consolation prize. I started telling her about the teachers I'd worked with, the children who still sent me Christmas cards, but her eyes glazed over. She interrupted to ask Michael about their dinner reservations next week at some French restaurant I'd never heard of. "You'd love it, Mom," Michael added quickly, but Sarah's sharp look made it clear the invitation wasn't extended to me. The moment that really unsettled me came when I offered to show her Michael's baby photos. I'd been organizing them all month, excited to share these precious memories with the woman my son loved. As I pulled out the album, Sarah accidentally knocked over her water glass, sending liquid spreading across the table toward the photos. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she exclaimed. But her movements to help were slow, almost deliberately so. I rushed to save the albums, and when I returned with towels, I found her holding the picture of Robert's funeral, studying it with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Your husband left you when Michael was young?" she asked, even though Michael had told her the truth. "He died," I corrected gently. "Heart attack." She tilted her head. "That must have been so hard financially. I can't imagine raising a child on a secretary's salary." There was something in her tone, like she was cataloging my struggles, filing them away for some purpose I couldn't understand. Michael shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. As they prepared to leave, I remembered the pearl necklace, my grandmother's, that I'd saved from selling all those years ago. I'd always imagined giving it to Michael's wife someday. "Sarah, I have something for you," I said, retrieving the velvet box from my bedroom. When I opened it, her eyes lit up for the first time all evening. She held the pearls up to the light, and I saw her examining them with an expertise that surprised me. "Are these real?" she asked. "They're vintage, aren't they? Probably worth a decent amount by now." She handed them back to me. "Maybe you should hold on to them until the wedding. For safekeeping." The way she said it, like she was already calculating their value, made something cold settle in my chest. After they left, I stood in my quiet apartment, looking at the untouched food and the water stain on my tablecloth, and for the first time in years, I felt afraid of losing my son. The week after that dinner, I sat with my book club, trying to focus on our discussion of Pride and Prejudice. But Dorothy noticed my distraction immediately. "Della, honey, you've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. What's wrong?" I found myself telling them about Sarah, the uncomfortable dinner, the way she'd looked at my apartment like she was appraising it for sale. The women exchanged glances. "She's probably just nervous about meeting you," Martha suggested. "You know how intimidating mother-in-laws can be." Everyone laughed, and I laughed too, desperate to believe it. I spent the next days constructing elaborate excuses in my mind. Sarah came from money. Of course, she'd be uncomfortable in my modest apartment. She was young, probably 28 to Michael's 35, still learning how to navigate family relationships. The phone thing? Her generation lived on their devices. The comment about my husband leaving? Maybe she was nervous and got confused. The pearl necklace reaction? She was probably just interested in family history. I told myself these lies while washing dishes, while volunteering at the food pantry, while lying awake at 3 in the morning. When Michael called to cancel our next Sunday dinner, I was ready with understanding. "Sarah's parents are in town, Mom. They're taking us to the plaza for brunch. You understand, right?" Of course I understood. Meeting the future in-laws was important. When he canceled the following Sunday, too, "Sarah wants to check out wedding venues." I reminded myself that wedding planning was stressful. Every bride deserved her fiancé's full attention during this special time. The third Sunday, he canceled. He didn't give a reason, just said, "Something came up." I spent that afternoon making beef stew anyway, eating alone at my kitchen table, saving the leftovers he'd never come for. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, caught me in the hallway one afternoon. "Haven't seen that handsome son of yours lately," she observed with the sharp eyes of someone who'd lived next door for 15 years. "Is everything all right?" I smiled brightly. the same smile I'd perfected when people asked how I managed after Robert died. "Oh, he's just busy with wedding planning. You know how it is." She nodded, but her eyes stayed concerned. "You make sure he doesn't forget where he came from," she said quietly, before disappearing into her apartment. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it with shaking hands, expecting to see my name listed as mother of the groom, perhaps a small note about how special this was. Instead, it was addressed to Ms. Della Morrison, like I was any other guest. The invitation itself was elaborate, gold embossed, probably cost more per card than I spent on groceries in a week. Inside, a small card indicated I was assigned to table 3. Not the family table, not even table 2. When I called Michael about it, Sarah answered his phone. "Oh, Della, yes, about the seating. We're doing something modern, mixing families and friends together. You'll love table 3. It's with Michael's colleagues from his first firm. Such interesting people." Her voice was syrup sweet, but there was steel underneath. When Michael finally got on the phone, he sounded tired. "Mom, it's just logistics. You know I want you there. That's what matters, right?" I agreed because what else could I do? Fight about table assignments like some petty person who didn't understand that love wasn't about where you sat at a reception. That night, I pulled out our family photo albums again, running my fingers over pictures of Michael at every stage. His first day of kindergarten, clutching his lunchbox I'd bought with tips from a particularly good Saturday shift. His high school graduation, both of us crying. His law school acceptance letter, which I'd framed and hung in my bedroom. In every photo, it was just us two against the world. "He's still my son," I whispered to Robert's picture on my nightstand. "This is just a phase. Once they're married and settled, everything will go back to normal." But even as I said it, even as I desperately wanted to believe it, something deep in my chest knew I was lying to myself. 2 weeks before the wedding, I woke up with a strange urge to surprise Michael at his office. I hadn't done that in months, not since Sarah had entered our lives. But that morning, something pulled me to pack up his favorite lunch, turkey and Swiss on rye with the spicy mustard he loved, homemade potato salad, and a slice of the lemon cake I'd baked the night before when I couldn't sleep. I put on my good coat, the one I saved for special occasions, and took the subway to Manhattan, to the gleaming tower where my son worked on the 23rd floor. The moment I stepped off the elevator at Preston, Klein & Associates, I felt the familiar pride seeing Michael's name on the directory as senior associate. Janet, the receptionist who'd been there since Michael started, usually greeted me with a warm smile and hug. Today she looked up from her desk, saw me, and her face went pale. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, glancing nervously toward the conference rooms. "I didn't know you were coming today." "Just wanted to surprise Michael with lunch," I said, holding up the brown bag like evidence of my innocent intentions. Janet stood up quickly, actually stepping out from behind her desk as if to block my path. "He's in a meeting right now, a very important meeting. Maybe you should wait." But she was cut off by the sound of laughter from conference room B, and I recognized Sarah's distinctive laugh, the one that always sounded like it was at someone's expense rather than with them. Janet's face crumpled with what looked like guilt. "Mrs. Morrison, I've worked here 8 years. You've always been so kind to me, remembering my birthday, bringing cookies at Christmas. I shouldn't say anything, but..." She looked around the empty reception area, then pulled me toward the coffee station, away from potential eavesdroppers. They were here yesterday, too, Sarah and her parents, with Michael. They had documents spread all over the conference table. My heart began to race, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of documents, Janet?" She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with her conscience. I had to bring in coffee for them. I couldn't help but see. They had papers about assets, property valuations. There was a folder with your name on it, Mrs. Morrison. Your full name and address. She paused, then reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "They left this behind. I was going to shred it, but maybe you should see it." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. The first document was a printout of my apartment building, with comparable rental prices highlighted. Market rate apartments in my building were going for $3,000 a month, while I paid $800 under rent control. There was a Google search history about elderly parent asset management and power of attorney requirements, New York. But what made my blood run cold was Sarah's handwriting on a yellow legal pad. Once we're married, we need to discuss relocating Dee to a more appropriate facility. The apartment could generate good rental income. M agrees the current situation is unsustainable. D, not Della, not Mom, not even Mrs. Morrison. Just an initial, like I was a problem to be solved on a spreadsheet. And M agrees, Michael, my son, apparently agreed that my situation was unsustainable. I stared at that word. Unsustainable. Is that what I'd become after 45 years of sustaining him? Janet was watching me with tears in her eyes. "There's more," she whispered, flipping to the next page. It was a brochure for Sunset Gardens Senior Living, a facility I recognized from ads on bus stops, the kind of place that advertised affordable care, which everyone knew meant minimum standards and maximum profit. Someone, Sarah's handwriting again, had circled the memory care unit section and written eventual transition in the margin. I stood there in my good coat, holding my homemade lunch, staring at evidence that my son and his fiancée weren't just pushing me aside for their new life. They were actively planning to dispose of me like an outdated piece of furniture that no longer matched their decor. The wedding day arrived with the kind of perfect September weather that should have meant good luck. I'd been awake since 4 in the morning, pressing my navy blue dress one more time, making sure every button on my jacket was secure, that my shoes were polished. I'd had my hair done at the salon, spending money I shouldn't have because I wanted to look dignified, respectable, like a mother any son would be proud to have at his wedding. The woman in the mirror looked presentable, but her eyes were hollow from 2 weeks of knowing what I knew and saying nothing. The ceremony was at St. Mark's Cathedral, where Robert and I had been married 46 years ago. I arrived early, expecting to be escorted to the front row. Instead, an usher I'd never met led me to the 3rd row, behind Sarah's extended family and Michael's law firm partners. When I tried to explain there must be a mistake, he checked his list and shook his head. "Row 3, left side, Ms. Morrison." Not even Mrs. Morrison. I sat down, my hands folded in my lap, watching as Sarah's mother was escorted to the front row, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my yearly pension. During the ceremony, when the priest asked who gives this woman to be married, Sarah's father stood up proudly. No one asked who gave Michael. I suppose they assumed he came from nowhere, sprouted fully formed in law school without any history, without the woman who'd held his hand through nightmares and homework, through grief and growth. When they exchanged rings, I noticed Michael was wearing new cufflinks, not the ones that had belonged to his father, the ones I'd saved for this exact occasion. The reception was at the Riverside Country Club, a place so fancy the valet looked skeptical when I pulled up in my 12-year-old Honda Civic. The ballroom was decorated in gold and cream, orchids on every table, a band playing soft jazz. I found my place card at table 12, in the back corner near the kitchen doors. My table mates were Michael's distant work acquaintances, and plus ones who looked as confused as I felt about why we were seated together. One woman asked me how I knew the couple. "I'm Michael's mother," I said. Her eyes widened in shock. "And they put you back here?" The speeches began after the salad course. Sarah's father talked about gaining a son, the son he'd always wanted, as if Michael had been an orphan he'd rescued. Michael's best man told stories about law school, never mentioning Michael's life before that. Then Sarah stood up, radiant in her designer dress, diamonds glittering at her throat. Diamonds I noticed, not pearls. She tapped her champagne glass with a knife, and the room fell silent. "Family," she began, gesturing to her parents' table. "Is everything to us?" She went on about her wonderful parents, her successful siblings, the legacy they were building together. Then she paused, her eyes finding mine across the room. Of course, when you get married, you have to make adjustments. Sometimes you inherit situations that need restructuring. A few people laughed nervously. For instance, she continued, her voice carrying clearly, we have too many people who think they're entitled to positions they haven't earned. Della, sweetie, you understand, right? You're not really family anymore. Michael has us now. We need your seat at the family table for someone more relevant. The room erupted in laughter. That kind of uncomfortable laughter when people aren't sure if something is a joke or not. Sarah's mother added loudly, besides, dear, you'd be more comfortable with people your own age at table 12. The family table conversation might be a bit above your pay grade. Oh wait, you're retired, aren't you? No pay grade at all. More laughter, crueler this time. I looked at Michael, my son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for. He sat there, staring at his champagne glass, his jaw clenched, but his mouth silent. He didn't defend me, didn't even look at me. In that moment, the betrayal was complete. Not just that he'd planned my removal from his life, but that he'd sit there and let his wife humiliate me publicly, let her erase 45 years of love with a few clever words and cruel laughter. I stood up from table 12 with as much dignity as I could muster, my legs shaking, but my head held high. Excuse me, I said quietly to my confused table mates, and walked toward the bathroom, feeling 300 pairs of eyes following my retreat. The laughter continued behind me, Sarah's voice calling out something about, some people just can't take a joke, as I pushed through the heavy bathroom door. I thought I'd have the bathroom to myself to collect my thoughts, but I heard voices coming from the handicapped stall at the end, the larger one with more space. It was Sarah's sister, Rebecca, and from the sound of it, she was on speakerphone with someone. I stood frozen, about to leave, when I heard my name. The old lady has no idea, Rebecca was saying, laughing. Sarah's got this whole thing planned perfectly. You should see her, walking around in that pathetic dress she probably bought at Sears. Once they're married, Michael's already agreed to sign over power of attorney. Sarah found out she's been sitting on a life insurance policy worth $500,000 that Michael's father left. My blood turned to ice. Robert's life insurance, the policy I'd scripted and saved to pay premiums on for 20 years, my safety net, my only real asset besides the apartment. The voice on the speaker, which I recognized as Sarah's mother, responded, the beautiful part is she doesn't even know Michael's been named as co-beneficiary now that he's an adult. All he has to do is have her declared incompetent. Sarah's already got a doctor friend who'll say she's showing signs of dementia. Then they can cash it out. Rebecca laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And the apartment. God, that rent-controlled place is a gold mine. It's worth at least $4,000 a month in today's market. Sarah already has a property management company ready to take over once they move the old bat to that state-funded nursing home in Queens. 6 months max, Mom says. Maybe less if they can prove she's unable to care for herself. What about Michael? The mother asked. Is he really okay with all this? He was hesitant at first, Rebecca admitted. But Sarah convinced him it's for the best. She told him his mother's getting too old to live alone anyway, that it's actually cruel to leave her in that apartment by herself. Plus, she reminded him how much they need the money for the house in Westchester they want. He sees it as taking care of her in a different way, making sure she's in a facility with medical care. My knees nearly buckled. A facility with medical care. They'd reimagined throwing me away as an act of kindness, but there was more. The best part, Rebecca continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, is the business connection. Dad's been wanting to partner with Preston, Klein & Associates for that international merger. Michael's the golden boy there now. This marriage seals that deal. Dad gets his legal team, Michael gets the partnership track, and Sarah gets the lifestyle she deserves. The old woman is just collateral damage. Speaking of which, Sarah's mother said, make sure someone's watching her at the reception. We can't have her making a scene or talking to Michael privately. Sarah needs at least 6 months of marriage to establish legal standing for the financial moves. Don't worry, Rebecca assured her. Sarah's got Michael's phone and she's screening all his messages. The old lady's been trying to reach him for 2 weeks, but Sarah deletes everything. After tonight's humiliation, she probably won't even try anymore. These old people, they just give up when you break their spirit. I heard the stall door starting to unlock and quickly slipped into a stall of my own, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. Rebecca's heels clicked past on the marble floor. When I heard the bathroom door close behind her, I finally let myself breathe, gasping like I'd been underwater. This wasn't just about pushing me aside or even taking my apartment. This was a calculated destruction of my entire life, my security, my dignity, my relationship with my son. They'd turned Michael into a weapon against me, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I locked the stall door and collapsed onto the closed toilet seat, my body shaking with silent sobs that I couldn't let anyone hear. The marble walls of that expensive bathroom became my confessional as 45 years of memories crashed over me like a tsunami of pain. I pressed my hand against my mouth to muffle the sounds, tasting the salt of tears that wouldn't stop coming. I remembered the night Robert died, how 12-year-old Michael had crawled into my bed, both of us crying until we couldn't breathe. "We'll take care of each other, won't we, Mom?" he'd whispered. "Always," I'd promised, holding him tight. Always and forever. That little boy who needed me was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as collateral damage in his climb to success. The Christmas when Michael was 14 flooded back. We couldn't afford a tree, so we drew one on the wall with green crayon and decorated it with paper ornaments. He made me a card that said, "Mom, you're my superhero. Someday I'll buy you a real tree, a house, everything you deserve." I still had that card in my jewelry box, next to Robert's wedding ring and the pearl necklace meant for a daughter-in-law who deserved it. What happened to that boy who saw me as his superhero? When did I become just an old woman in the way? I thought about all the nights I'd come home from the diner at 2 in the morning, my feet so swollen I could barely get my shoes off. Michael would be asleep at the kitchen table, having tried to wait up for me, his homework spread around him. I'd cover him with a blanket and finish his laundry, iron his school uniform, pack his lunch, all on 3 hours of sleep. The morning would come too soon, but his smile at breakfast made it worthwhile. "You're the best mom in the world," he'd say, and I believed we were a team. The sobs came harder as I remembered selling my mother's jewelry piece by piece. The pearl necklace was all I'd kept, saving it for Michael's wedding day, for a woman who would love him like I did. Each piece I'd sold had killed me a little. My mother's emerald brooch went for his textbooks, her diamond earrings for his law school application fees. "They're just things," I'd told myself, but they weren't. They were my history, my inheritance, traded for his future. A future where I apparently had no place. I could hear Robert's voice in my head from that last morning before he died. "Take care of our boy, Della. You're stronger than you know." But sitting on that cold toilet seat in my carefully pressed dress, I felt anything but strong. I was just a foolish old woman who'd given everything to someone who'd traded her for a country club membership and a business merger. The worst part, even knowing what I knew, even hearing their plan to destroy me, I still loved him. That's what shattered me completely. I still loved my son. My reflection in my compact mirror was a horror show. Mascara ran down my cheeks in black rivers. My carefully styled hair was disheveled from running my hands through it. The lipstick I'd applied so carefully was smeared. I looked exactly like what I was. A broken woman who'd just learned her life's work had been for nothing. Every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every double shift, every moment I'd chosen Michael's needs over my own, it had all led to this bathroom stall, sobbing alone while 300 people laughed at my humiliation. "You stupid, stupid woman," I whispered to my reflection. "You gave him everything, and this is what you get." Robert would be so ashamed of what our son became. But even as I said it, I knew Robert would be ashamed of me too, for giving up, for letting them win. That's when something shifted inside me, like a switch flipping from despair to something else, something harder, something my sweet Robert had never seen, but that had been forged in those years of surviving without him. I stared at my ruined reflection in the compact mirror, and for a moment, I saw someone else looking back. Not the broken woman with running mascara, but the 23-year-old who'd stood at Robert's graveside with a 12-year-old boy's hand in hers, making a silent promise to survive whatever came next. That woman hadn't had time for tears. She'd had a son to raise and a life to build from ashes. "You're stronger than you know." Robert's words echoed in my mind, but this time they didn't sound like consolation. They sounded like a battle cry. I stood up slowly, my knees still shaky, but my spine straightening vertebra by vertebra, like a flower turning toward the sun after a storm. Sarah thought she'd broken my spirit. Rebecca said old people just give up. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wiped my face with the fancy paper towels, each swipe removing not just makeup, but years of being everyone's sweet, accommodating Della, the woman who never complained when Michael canceled plans, the woman who smiled when relegated to table 12, the woman who let people call her apartment unsustainable while she'd sustained a family on nothing but will and love. That woman was done. It was time for them to meet the woman who'd worked 3 jobs, who'd survived widowhood, who'd built something from nothing. My phone was in my purse, and as I pulled it out, I remembered something crucial. 3 weeks ago, at Sarah's bridal shower, I'd been recording a voice message for Dorothy from my book club when I dropped my phone in my purse without ending the recording. It had captured 2 hours of audio, including Sarah and her mother discussing their plans in detail, thinking I was in the kitchen, helping with dishes. I'd discovered it by accident. Later, saved it thinking I was paranoid, but now it was evidence. But that wasn't all. For the past year, I'd been teaching myself to use my smartphone properly, taking videos of Michael during our Sunday dinners. For memories, I told him, and he'd laughed, indulging his old mother's attempts at technology. I had dozens of videos of him promising to take care of me, acknowledging my sacrifices, saying on camera that he owed me everything. There was one from just 2 months ago where he'd said, "Mom, your apartment will always be your home. I promise you'll never have to leave it unless you want to." He'd been holding my hands when he said it, looking directly into the camera, and then there was the document I'd never told anyone about. Robert's original will and life insurance policy, recorded on video by our lawyer the day before Robert died, as if he'd known somehow. In it, Robert clearly stated that the life insurance was for me alone, that Michael would inherit only upon my natural death, and any attempt to manipulate or coerce me should result in Michael forfeiting all claims. I'd kept that video on a USB drive in my jewelry box, never imagining I'd need it. Standing in that bathroom, I made my mental list. James, my nephew who worked in IT, had always been protective of me since Robert died. He'd helped me set up my phone, taught me about cloud storage, and most importantly, he knew how to connect devices to projectors. Mr. Patterson, Robert's old friend and our family lawyer before Michael became too successful for small-time attorneys, was still practicing at 75. He'd been at Robert's funeral, at Michael's graduation, and I knew he'd be horrified by what was happening. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. My makeup was gone, but my eyes were clear and dangerous. Sarah wanted to talk about family, about who belonged and who didn't. She wanted to humiliate me in front of 300 people? Fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing. I was the woman who'd raised Michael Morrison from nothing to something. I knew how to build, but that meant I also knew how to demolish. I stepped out of the bathroom with purpose, my phone already in my hand. The reception was in full swing, the band playing something classical while guests mingled between courses. I had maybe 20 minutes before the next round of speeches. 20 minutes to destroy their carefully orchestrated plan. First call, James. He answered on the second ring, music blaring in the background from whatever Saturday night activity a 30-year-old engineer enjoyed. Aunt Della, everything okay? His voice immediately sharpened when he heard mine. James, I need you at the Riverside Country Club. Now, bring your laptop and the presentation equipment you use for work. I need something played on their projection system during the speeches. What's going on? Is this about Michael's wedding? I could hear him already. Moving, keys jingling. They're trying to destroy me, James. But I have proof. Videos, recordings. Can you get here in 15 minutes? His voice went cold. I'll be there in 10. Those bastards. I knew something was off when they didn't invite me. That's when I realized my nephew, Robert's sister's son, hadn't even been invited to the wedding. Second call, Mr. Patterson. His wife answered but quickly handed him the phone when I identified myself. Della Morrison? My dear, how are you? I heard Michael was getting married today. His voice was warm, grandfatherly, but I knew the shark that lived beneath that kindness. Henry, I need you here. Riverside Country Club. It's an emergency. They're planning to take everything. The apartment, the life insurance. They want to have me declared incompetent. The silence on the other end was deafening then. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Della, document everything you can. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and for God's sake, don't let them isolate you. I almost cried at the protective anger in his voice. Bring the Robertson file, I added, using the code name we'd given Robert's video will years ago. Dear God, it's come to that, he asked. It's come to that, I confirmed. While walking slowly back toward the ballroom, I used my phone to upload everything to the cloud storage James had set up for me. The bridal shower recording where Sarah detailed the plan, Michael's promises about the apartment, the video will, screenshots of the documents Janet had shown me. My hands were steady now, each upload a bullet in my arsenal. I stopped our waiter, a young man who'd been kind to me earlier when he'd noticed I was at the wrong table. Excuse me, what time are the speeches resuming? He checked his watch. About 15 minutes, ma'am. Right after the main course is served. Perfect. I slipped him a 20. Money I shouldn't spend, but this was war. Could you make sure the projection screen is down and the system is on? My nephew is bringing a surprise video for the bride and groom. His face lit up. Of course. How wonderful. I'll let the AV team know. If only he knew what kind of surprise it would be. I made one more call, this one to Dorothy from book club. Dorothy, it's Della. Remember how you always said I was too kind to people who didn't deserve it? She laughed. Finally coming to your senses about someone? You could say that. I need you to do something. Go on Facebook, find Michael's law firm page, and go live. Tell them you're at the Morrison Hartley wedding, and something big is about to happen. Can you do that? Dorothy, 72 and more social media savvy than most teenagers, cackled with delight. Drama at a society wedding? Honey, I'm already logging in. I walked back into the ballroom just as the main course was being served. Sarah was holding court at the head table, her parents glowing with pride. Michael still wouldn't look at me, but I saw him glance at his phone repeatedly, the phone Sarah supposedly had. She didn't have it. He was checking it nervously, perhaps feeling the walls closing in without knowing why. James texted, "Parking, be there in 2." Mr. Patterson texted, "En route with documents." Dorothy texted, "Going live in 5, already have 47 viewers." I sat down at table 12, picked up my water glass with a steady hand, and waited. The main course was Dover sole with some kind of cream sauce that probably cost more per plate than my weekly groceries. I watched the room like a general surveying a battlefield. Sarah's parents were toasting each other with champagne that cost more than most people's car payments. Michael kept rubbing his temples, a gesture I recognized from when he was a child trying to solve a difficult math problem. He knew something was wrong but couldn't place it. James entered through the service door, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. dressed in jeans and a wrinkled button-down that stood out like a scream among the formal wear. Security started moving toward him, but I stood up and waved. "That's my nephew. He has a surprise for the couple." The security guard hesitated, looking toward the head table. Sarah was too busy posing for photos to notice, and Michael was staring at his plate. The guard shrugged and let James through. I watched James charm the AV technician, showing him something on his laptop that made the young man's eyes widen. They huddled together near the projection booth, cables appearing from James's bag like snakes from a charmer's basket. The screen behind the head table flickered to life, showing the wedding logo, 2 hearts intertwined with S and M forever in gold script. Soon it would show something very different. Mr. Patterson arrived next, his presence commanding despite his age. He wore a full 3-piece suit, carrying his leather briefcase like a weapon. Several of Michael's colleagues recognized him. Henry Patterson was a legend in New York legal circles, the kind of lawyer who'd refuse judgeships because he preferred the fight of the courtroom. He walked directly to me, kissed my cheek formally, and pulled up a chair. "The documents are ready," he said quietly. "Security footage from your apartment building, notarized statements, and Robert's video will. I also took the liberty of calling Judge Harrison. He's very interested in potential elder abuse cases." The best man was tapping his microphone, preparing for the next round of speeches. Sarah stood up, smoothing her dress, ready for more adoration. The room began to quiet, servers retreating to the walls, glasses being refilled for toasts. I saw Rebecca check her phone, then whisper urgently to Sarah, showing her something on the screen. Sarah's face went pale for a moment, then flushed red. She grabbed Michael's arm, hissing something in his ear. Dorothy's live stream was apparently gaining traction. I could see other guests, checking their phones, looking confused. The wedding hashtag Sarah had so carefully curated was being hijacked by comments about something big about to happen, an elder abuse scandal brewing. Sarah's social media perfect wedding was already cracking. Michael stood up abruptly, looking around the room until his eyes found mine. For the first time all day, we made eye contact. I saw panic there, maybe even regret. He started walking toward me, but Sarah grabbed his arm again, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "The speeches," she said loudly. "We need to do the speeches now." But her voice was shrill, desperate. She knew something was coming, but not what. James gave me a subtle thumbs up. Everything was loaded and ready. The projection screen behind the head table glowed innocuously, but I knew it was about to become a window into truth. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase, pulling out official-looking documents, arranging them precisely on our table like a dealer setting up cards. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Several lawyers from Michael's firm were watching us now, recognizing the legendary Henry Patterson and wondering what he was doing at the reject table. The best man finished his second speech, something about love conquering all that felt like acid in my throat. The band leader announced, "And now a special surprise for the bride and groom." Sarah's mother started to stand, probably expecting some orchestrated moment she'd planned. But I was already on my feet, walking toward the microphone with the dignity of a woman who'd raised a son alone, survived poverty, and was about to teach everyone in this room what real family meant. I reached the microphone, my hand steady as I adjusted it to my height. The room fell silent. 300 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion. Sarah's face was frozen in a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Good evening," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm Della Morrison, Michael's mother, though according to our lovely bride, I'm not really family anymore." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd. "I have a wedding gift for the happy couple," I continued, gesturing to James. "Something that shows what family really means to the Hartley-Morrison union." The screen behind them flickered, and suddenly Sarah's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear from the recording at her bridal shower. "Once we get the old bat to sign over power of attorney, we'll have access to everything. Michael's already on board. He knows his mother's getting too old to manage her affairs. The life insurance alone is worth $500,000. We just need to get her declared incompetent. I have a doctor who will sign whatever we need." The room gasped collectively. Sarah shot up from her chair, screaming, "Turn it off! That's fake! That's—" But her own mother's voice interrupted her, coming from the speakers. "The apartment will generate $4,000 a month easy. Just get her into that nursing home in Queens. Use the memory unit excuse if you have to." Michael's face had gone white as paper. He stood up, reaching for the microphone, but the next video was already playing. It was him, just 2 months ago, holding my hands across my kitchen table. "Mom, your apartment will always be your home. I promise you'll never have to leave it unless you want to. You've sacrificed everything for me. I owe you my entire life." Then another clip, Sarah and Rebecca from tonight, in the bathroom, not knowing I was there. "6 months max and we'll have everything. The old lady's been trying to reach Michael for 2 weeks, but I delete everything. These old people, they just give up when you break their spirit." The room erupted. Sarah's father jumped up, trying to rush the projection booth, but James simply held up his laptop, showing he had backups. "There's more," I said into the microphone, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Mr. Patterson, would you please?" Henry Patterson stood up, his commanding presence silencing the room. "I'm here to confirm that any attempt to coerce Mrs. Morrison would constitute elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. I've already filed protective documentation with the court." He held up a tablet and the screen changed to show Robert's video will, recorded the day before he died. Robert's face filled the screen, younger but unmistakably Michael's father. His voice, which I hadn't heard in 25 years, brought tears to my eyes. "I leave my life insurance policy solely to my wife, Della Morrison. This is her security for raising our son alone. Any attempt by any party, including our son Michael, to manipulate, coerce, or force her to surrender. These funds should result in immediate forfeiture of any inheritance. Della, if you're watching this, remember, you're stronger than you know." Sarah let out a scream of rage and turned on Michael. "You said the insurance was yours. You said she was senile. You said—" She stopped, realizing she was confirming everything in front of 300 witnesses. Her parents were backing away from the head table, her father on his phone, probably with his own lawyer. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "Dorothy, are you still streaming?" Dorothy waved from the back, her phone held high. 2,000 viewers and climbing, honey." I looked directly at Sarah. "Your wedding is viral, dear, but not the way you planned." Michael finally found his voice. "Mom, But I held up my hand. "Mr. Patterson has something else to show you." The screen changed one more time, showing security footage from my apartment building, dated 2 days ago. Sarah was there with a locksmith, trying to get into my apartment. The building manager was explaining that she had no legal right to access. "When Mrs. Morrison dies," Sarah was saying, "this will all be ours anyway." The room exploded. Guests were filming everything, some calling police, others simply leaving in disgust. Sarah's family was in full retreat, her father shouting about lawsuits and damaged reputations. Michael stood alone at the head table, his world collapsing as his law firm colleagues walked out, their faces showing exactly what this meant for his career. The ballroom descended into complete chaos. Sarah ripped off her veil, throwing it at Michael while screaming, "This is your fault. You said she was just a pathetic old woman. You said she'd never fight back." She grabbed her phone, trying to call someone, anyone, but her bridesmaids were already backing away, not wanting to be associated with what was quickly becoming the most infamous wedding in New York social media history. Michael's managing partner, Richard Preston himself, approached the head table with the measured steps of an executioner. "Morrison," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "clear out your office Monday morning. We'll mail you your personal items." Michael stammered, "Mr. Preston, I can explain." But Preston had already turned his back, gathering the other partners who were all shaking their heads in disgust. The merger Sarah's father had been planning was evaporating in real time. Sarah's father was on his phone with what sounded like his PR team, his face purple with rage. "Kill the story, I don't care what it costs." But it was too late. Dorothy gleefully announced, 5,000 viewers! Oh, and look, someone from the Times just commented. Sarah's mother was crying, mascara running down her face, wailing about their reputation at the country club. "We'll be laughing stocks while the Vanderbilts were here. The Astors saw everything." Within 20 minutes, the Riverside Country Club was nearly empty. Guests fled like rats from a sinking ship, but not before many stopped at my table to express their horror at how I'd been treated. Michael's colleague, Jennifer, pressed my hand and whispered, "I knew something was off when they tried to seat you in the back. No real family would do that." Even the caterers were packing up despite being paid for another 3 hours. Nobody wanted to be associated with this disaster. Sarah tried one last desperate move, lunging at me with her bouquet raised like a weapon. "You ruined everything, you horrible old witch." But James stepped between us, and Mr. Patterson calmly announced, "That's assault. Adding criminal charges to the civil suit, Mrs. Hartley?" Sarah froze, then ran from the ballroom, her designer shoes clicking on the marble like a countdown to her social death. Michael finally approached me, his face a mask of misery. "Mom, please let me explain. Sarah convinced me. She said it was for your own good. She said—" I looked at my son, this stranger in an expensive tuxedo who'd traded his mother for a country club membership. "She said what, Michael? That I was just collateral damage? That I should be in a state-funded facility while you collected my life insurance?" He fell to his knees right there in the abandoned ballroom, surrounded by overturned chairs and abandoned champagne glasses. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I lost myself. I forgot who I was, where I came from." The boy who'd cried in my arms was there in his eyes, but it was too late. "You're not my son," I said quietly but firmly. "My son would never have done this. My son died the day he chose them over family." Mr. Patterson handed Michael a restraining order. "You and Miss Hartley are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mrs. Morrison or attempting to contact her in any way. The district attorney's office will be in touch about the elder abuse charges." Michael looked at the papers, then at me, his eyes begging, but I was done being the forgiving mother. 3 days later, the New York Post ran the story on page 6. High society wedding becomes elder abuse scandal. Sarah's family immediately cut her off, more concerned about saving their own reputation than supporting their daughter. She tried to salvage the marriage, but Michael was toxic now. No firm would hire him, and the state bar was investigating his ethics violations. She filed for divorce after 2 weeks, but there was nothing to take. Michael had lost everything. The wedding venue, mortified by the publicity, refunded the entire payment to avoid further association with the scandal. That money, which Sarah's parents demanded Michael repay, became the first of many debts that would eventually drive him to bankruptcy. 6 months have passed since that September wedding, and my life has transformed in ways I never imagined possible. The video of the wedding went beyond viral. It became a cultural moment, sparking conversations about elder abuse, family loyalty, and the price of greed. News outlets from around the world picked up the story. "The wedding revenge heard round the world," one headline read. I even got a call from a documentary filmmaker, though I politely declined. I'd had enough cameras for one lifetime. The best part? A production company bought my story rights for enough money to not just secure my future, but to help others. I sold that rent-controlled apartment, not because anyone forced me, but because I wanted to. With the proceeds and the life insurance money that remained safely mine, I bought a small house by the sea in Maine. It has a garden where I grow real flowers now, not just balcony plants. Every morning, I drink coffee on my porch, watching the waves crash against the rocks, and I think about how Robert was right. I was stronger than I knew. Michael's letters arrive weekly, forwarded through Mr. Patterson's office to respect the restraining order. They sit unopened in a box in my closet. I know what they say: apologies, regrets, promises to change. But here's what I've learned. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Michael showed me he was someone who could sit silent while his mother was humiliated, who could plan her disposal like she was outdated furniture. That's who he is. The boy I raised, the one I sacrificed everything for, maybe he never really existed, or maybe he died somewhere between law school and that country club membership. Sarah Hartley. She went back to her maiden name immediately, tried to salvage her reputation by claiming she was joking, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the internet never forgets. Her Instagram influencer dreams died along with her marriage. Last I heard, she was working at her father's company in a position created just to keep her out of the public eye. The Hartley family's grand merger plans collapsed, and several of their society friends quietly distanced themselves. Money can buy many things, but it can't buy back a reputation destroyed in front of 2,000 live stream viewers. Michael lost everything. The law firm fired him for ethics violations. The state bar suspended his license pending investigation. The contacts, the prestige, the six-figure salary, gone. He works now at a legal aid clinic in Brooklyn, the kind of place that helps people who can't afford justice. There's some irony in that, maybe even a chance for redemption, but that's his journey to make alone. He lives in a studio apartment smaller than the one I raised him in, and I wonder if he thinks about that irony late at night. But this story isn't really about revenge, though I won't lie. Watching their plan crumble was satisfying. It's about knowing your worth. For 45 years, I measured my value by what I could sacrifice, what I could give up, how small I could make myself to ensure someone else's success. I accepted table 12 at my own son's wedding because I'd been trained to accept whatever scraps of appreciation came my way. The moral of my story is this: your sacrifices don't mean you deserve less love, less respect, less dignity. They mean you deserve more. When you give everything to raise a child, you're not creating a debt they must repay, but you're also not creating a doormat for them to walk on. Love shouldn't make you blind to betrayal. Family shouldn't be conditional on your usefulness, and you're never ever too old to stand up and say, enough. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have sat quietly at table 12, accepting the humiliation to keep the peace? Would you have confronted them privately, hoping for reconciliation? Or would you have done what I did, used their own arrogance against them, letting them destroy themselves in front of everyone who mattered to them? Tell me in the comments below. What would you do if your own family tried to throw you away? And remember, you're stronger than you know. You just might not have discovered it yet.